has been a very long weekend for many of us. And Kira really loved it, apparently. But we just want to get a little bit into, like I said yesterday, we started off, but we sort of made it short because of time restraints and stuff like that. People wanted to go home. But I wanted to just hit on some things that I didn't talk about yesterday. So I was asked to speak about what St. Timothy and St. Athanasius, or St. Athanasius, if you like to say. When Anthony heard me say Athanasius, he would be upset. But I was asked to talk about what St. Timothy and St. Athanasius is like on a day-to-day basis. Just so that we can share what we're doing with you guys. And obviously I'm going to go back and report back to Brother Anthony and tell him all the great things that St. Paul Chicago is doing. So, STSA, that's our acronym. That's what we like to sort of use. And we have a 3-premise thing that we like to go by. We call it EAR. Extreme love, ancient faith, real community. Extreme love, ancient faith, real community. And we start with the extreme love because, like I said yesterday, we believe it's the most important aspect of the church. So, like I said yesterday, we haven't really started off doing outreach. We haven't went out into the community and done anything. We're still in what we call the beta phase of the church. We're building the inside of the church before we can go out and start the public launch, where we're inviting our community in, hosting events, doing catechumen classes, doing various different other things. So right now we're in the present part of the church where we're really just working on ourselves as a community and building ourselves up so that when the time comes, we're ready to go out and serve, and we're ready to host people and facilitate them into being members of the church, where they won't get lost in the system. So, Abuna Anthony likes to use this water bottle example, which basically is that when you see a water bottle, and if a water bottle is filled with dirt, right? If it's a pure water bottle, and then all of a sudden you begin to start pouring dirt into it, what comes out is all the water's outside, it's all out, but what's inside is left is just dirt. So he always tells us that what we need to have from the inside is we need to always have like a really strong inward community where we grow in love with each other. So what's coming out is always pure, but what's staying inside is still pure. There's no dirt that's in there. So we started off for our first 10 weeks talking about the core values of the church. And we have 10 core values, which I'll get into in a second. But the 10 core values are really who we are. And the most important thing about the core values is anytime we start falling off, we always say, hey, you're not following core value number 1. Or hey, you're not following core value number 2. Hey, you're not following core value number 3. It sort of puts us in check. It's our code of, like our standard that we like to live by and abide by. I'm not saying that we're perfect at it, but we're saying at least we have it on paper what we want to be like. And I'm sure you guys have your core values as well. I saw that you guys have 5 talks or 6 talks about core values on the website. So just remember the core values and the vision and who you guys want to be as a church. Like, they're not just there to be put on paper. They're there to remind you this is what you set out to wanting to be, and this is who we want to grow as a church together. So then we went on after that. We started with a series called Not Even an End. And I actually recommend it for every single one of you guys. You guys go watch that series. It's a great series. Because it talks about how, like, it says, it's from a verse in Ephesians. It says, but let not be among you not even an hint of sexual immorality. And it's not just about sexual immorality as in lust or as in, like, sexual immorality of, it's just anything about lust. So anything that is the strong, uncontrollable urge that you're able to overcome. So the premise of the series is that we're able to overcome any of the lusts that we have in our life. So lust for power, lust for fame, lust for sexual activities, lust for whatever. We want it to be a church that's a pure church because we believe, like we said, God is very particular about the house that he lives in. And like when you look at when he was designing the temple, when he had, even when you see the design of the ark, design of the tabernacle, the design of all the different intricate details. God is very particular, point by point, of how He wants His home, how He wants His dwelling place to be designed, and where the places He wants to dwell in. So if we are a church that's impure, if we got like things that are going on amongst us that are sort of not pleasing to God, sometimes, and most of the times, that hinders us from being able to really maximize who we are supposed to be. And what do I mean by that? For example, for men, they say for men, the most important thing is their integrity and their humility. Once a man loses his integrity and loses his humility, he loses his ability to be a leader. So a lot of times, for example, men, they'll struggle with the sin of sexual lust. We're not going to get into that aspect, but what that does is gives them a feeling of guilt, it gives a feeling of shame, and it hinders the ability to really do something great for God's kingdom. So what we said as a church is, like, we know that there is that aspect with guys. We know there's other aspects with girls that they struggle with. And what we're going to do is, like we said, we're going to link arms together, and we're going to grow together as a church, and we're going to say that there's not even going to be a hint of lust in our church. Like we said, lust, not just for sexual things, lust for fame, lust for career, lust for material possession, lust for all these other things. Then we went into the next series where we said, hey, we want to be not only a pure church, we want to be a church that's a praying church. Because that's the key to a strong, successful church, is a praying church. A church that's always that isn't strong standing, but on its knees is the most amazing church. Because on our knees, we know that's where we find the most strength. In prayer, in reaching and having a relationship with God and conversing with Him. Not just, on Sundays, or not just even one time per day, but throughout the whole entire day, for having a conversation with God. And all of us are really doing that together. Imagine we're praying for St. Paul's together. So 50 of us are praying for the same prayer. There's strength in numbers. God is definitely listening a lot more if He hears. It's not more or less, He's always listening. But when He sees the request of 50 of His beloved requesting for the same thing, which God please bless this church, He's going to get His ear, and He's going to hear, and He's going to answer. And that's what we were hopefully trying to grow as a church, is that we be a praying church. Again, not just a pure church, not a pure church, but not even purity in our church. A praying church. And then the next series that we're talking about is the family life. So I'm going to just start a series today called For Better or For Worse, which is talking about strengthening the dynamic of the family. So every single one of us have families. Every single one of us, have different things, different struggles that go on in our lives. The goal of this series, this is actually the first of the beta public launch. This is where we're really going to try to outreach the community, really try to invite people, bring co-workers, bring friends, invite different, put out flyers, do all these different things for this series, For Better or For Worse. So pray that really it has the outcomes that it ought to have. It's not that we're going to build and then all of a sudden there's going to be a point where we're going to be a perfect church. No, it's not like that. Go ahead, sir. We'll continue. So here's the most important key things that we have in our church that we believe in. Is we believe in two things: life groups and leisure groups. So what are life groups and leisure groups? Life groups are basically small group function, which is you get a group of guys or girls or whatever, basically meet on a regular weekly basis where they grow together, they share with each other, they grow in scripture, they encourage each other, and what we want to do is every single person that walks in, we want to be able to plug them into a life group, so they feel that they get that community, they feel like they get that fellowship, and they feel like they get that accountability. The second thing is leisure groups. People like I said, the most important aspect of a church is not just a friendly church, but a church that you can have have friends. So what leisure groups are is, say for example, we're a group of guys that like to play basketball on Thursday evenings. We put on the website for men's leisure group. Thursday nights at 8 p.m. we play basketball at the Moxie. Whoever is interested in playing basketball comes and meets us, and it builds community, it builds fellowship. Say there's couples that like to go out to eat pizza on Friday nights. There's couples leisure group going out to eat with kids or without kids. Basically, the point is to build community, to build strength among us, and to really get to know each other, not in a high-fi fashion, but to really know more about who each person is in the church. Like, we all know each other now on a first-name basis. We know what, professions we all are. We know, what our interests are, because we're really growing together as a community. Right now, you guys are in the phase where you're small enough to be able to do that. Really know who's studying what, who's doing this, who's doing that. And eventually, when newer people start coming into the church, you'll be able to plug them in. The cool thing about D.C. Church is it's a very commuter/internship/ there's just always people coming in and out. So we're getting the visitors all the time. People coming from other Coptic churches all over different parts of the country. So while they're there, we want to optimize the time that they're there so that they can take a piece of STSA with them. That we don't want to leave any person walking into the doors of our church walking out a different person. We want them to take with them from STSA and bring it back to their local communities to be effective in those areas. So, like I said, the key for us right now, what we're doing is we're just really trying to build a community. So we're having barbecues, we're going out to dinners, we're having life groups, we're having leisure groups, we're having all these different things in hope that once we really are able to get to know each other and be strengthened, core group of people, when people come in, they can be plugged in immediately to a life group, leisure group, or whatever. We're working right now on a membership class. And what membership classes are is basically when somebody is coming into the church, how do they learn about Christianity, first of all, then Orthodoxy, then Coptic Orthodoxy. So that's the structure of how we know who Jesus is, what his straight path or straight faith is, and what's the original, where do we get our culture from, even though we're an American church, but there is still an aspect of the culture in terms of rites, in terms of traditions that comes from Egypt. So that's basically where we're at right now. So like I said, here's the core values. Just give me 1 second. Joe is texting me if I have a ride or not. I'm sure we'll find something. Okay, anyway. So limitless acceptance. Limitless acceptance, we said yesterday, we discussed that in depth thoroughly, that we believe that every person who enters into our church is the most important person in the world. You're special, you're important, you mean something to us, we want to make you feel as important as you should be. And that person is sent by God and should be loved and accepted as such. Okay, so limitless acceptance. Next thing we believe is in an authentic community. We believe that God created the church to fulfill our relational needs, in addition to our spiritual needs. We reject superficiality in relationships with one another, just as we reject superficiality in our relationship with God. So we believe that the community, like we said, is such an important aspect of the growing of the church, because we don't want just to have superficial relations. We want to be able to, like we said, to link arms, to grow together, and to really be able to grow as a church, optimizing all the gifts and talents that we have. But we'll get into that later. And the third thing is transformational communal worship. So you know how oftentimes as Coptic people, we sort of have gotten into the habit of rushing through, for example, Tisbeh. So you know how when we do Tisbeh, we sort of fly through Tisbeh. Or even when we read Agpeya, because we've memorized it, many of us, we sort of just fly through the songs, fly through the litanies, fly through all these different things. What we've realized is that's a problem. And I know many of you guys have realized that's a problem as well. But what we've said is we want to make our worship to be transformational. So every single time I go into a liturgy, I'm literally being transformed by that liturgy. Because that's what the goal of the church, the liturgy is that, we're going in, receiving Jesus, and we're walking out different people. And that's how every one of our worship services want them to be. We gather to be transformed by the real presence of God in our midst every time we meet. Liturgical prayer is not just routine. It's life-giving and real. It's the center of our life as a family. Our worship is the center of our life. So we want to grow together in that. We want it to be transformational. We don't want it to be the type of thing that is routine, sort of going through the motions. Because that's the last thing we want to be. Alright, so that's transformation of worship. Does anyone have questions about that, by the way? So far? Good? Okay. Sure. Well, I think it's both. I think when somebody goes to our website, for example, they want to know what the church is about. They want to know who we are, what we believe in, what our core values are. And then when they come in, they want to know if it's real. And people can genuinely realize when something is fake or something is real. So if you're coming up to me and you're overly friendly, but as soon as like the service is over and we're sort of leaving and you're not inviting me to come out to eat with you, or you're not really interested on what my next step is, people are going to realize that it's not real community, it's not authentic community, it's not witness acceptance. So it's important for people to know what we're about, but as well, it's not just words, it's not just jargon, it's not just a bunch of sentences on a website. The most important thing is that we're actually living that out. And the living it out, like I said, is the hardest part in the world. But that's why every single time we're starting to veer off of that, Abuna is constantly reminding us of, hey guys, let's go back. What are our core values? Authentic, like community, limitless acceptance, passionate pursuit of God, transformational community, worship, irrational generosity. Like he always constantly reminding us of what we believe in, what we're trying to do, and what the vision is. And that's what we all have to keep an eye on. What is the vision of this church? You guys have your vision statement. You guys know what the church is about. You have to keep your eye on the prize, because what happens, the Bible says it very clearly, where there is no vision, people perish. Where there is no vision, people perish. Proverbs 29:2. So if we don't know where we're going, if we don't keep our eye on the prize, it's going to be easy for us to forget about witness acceptance. It's going to be easy for us to forget about community worship. It's going to be easy to forget about all these different things. But that's something that we have to be constantly holding each other accountable for as the church. So I don't know if that answers your question. But the most important thing is last night I saw something that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. I kid you not, that was so beautiful to see a person coming into the church. Like, my talk yesterday was like basically real time. Like, you guys had a real like example of it and how to act. A guy's coming into the church searching for somebody to care for him, searching for somebody to love him. He's hit rock bottom. Everybody opened up their arms to him. Everybody shared with experiences. Everybody poured out their hearts and said, I'm struggling with you too. I'm feeling what you're feeling. And that was so amazing. So you guys are definitely on, like, I think you guys are on more than the right path. The key is just to keep that up. To always be in the same way and not to be sort of like, you know how when you first started asking questions, everybody was sort of like hesitant to raise their hand and say anything. Because as a people, we're sort of used to, and I'm gonna say this is a generalization, forgive me. As a Egyptian people, we sort of like to cover who we are on the inside and wear big masks on the outside to make ourselves look like we have everything put together. But actually, the church isn't meant, people in the church aren't meant to always look like they got everything together. They're meant to look like patients going to a hospital. So they have struggles, they have illnesses, they have sicknesses. And that's what we have to always hold ourselves accountable and say, hey, I'm down right now. Hey, I have this issue that I'm struggling with. I need your help. Can you help me out? And that's where we have to come to each other and really be able to grow to each other, go to each other, push each other, and encourage each other. So, yesterday was beautiful. I couldn't, yesterday when I was going to sleep at night, I couldn't stop thinking about all these things. It was so great to see like a church loving somebody to death. Like that, he wants us. Like, you guys love me so much. It was clear because you guys love Jesus. It wasn't about him. It was about Jesus. He was just that you saw Jesus and you loved him so much. So passionate pursuing God. So we don't stop worshiping after we leave the church. We seek to live passionate lives for God, pursuing him every day through prayer, Bible reading, giving, witnessing, and everything we do. So like we said that limitless acceptance isn't just in the church. Authentic community isn't just in the church. Isn't just in church people. Transformational communal worship is meant to make us take what we have in church and go out and live that passion pursuit for God on a daily basis. And this is the key, guys, because what's the expression they always say? Oh, we know a lot about the Sunday Christians. We don't know too many about the Monday Christians. We know too many things about the Tuesday Christians. It's what happens from Saturday or Sunday to the rest of the week amongst many of us is that we sort of forget this passion pursuing God. So in our households, we have to be passionately pursuing God, like on our own, in our own intimate way. Because here's the thing, I learned this in Texas. I really did. Serving in STSA at the beginning, I'll be honest with you, and Anthony knows this was on camera. I was so bitter there because I went from the church in New York where I was serving actively, a million things going on every single day, talk here, talk there, traveling here, service there, to now going to a church where I was no longer really a servant. I was just like everybody else. And that to me was a very humbling experience because, like, we've sort of gotten into this way of there's the servants, there's the priest, the hierarchy, and there's the servants, and then there's everybody else. But the key to a strong church is everybody is of equal. There's no such thing as, like I said to you guys yesterday, there's no such thing as servants in the church. Everybody has the same active role. Everybody's pursuing the same purpose. Everybody's passionate about the same cause. So that was a struggle for me because in the beginning I didn't know what my role was in the church. What am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to do? I went from doing all these different things and now I'm really doing nothing. But eventually God began to open up eyes to me on what to do, what the goal was, what the mission was. And I started realizing that it's not about what my role is. That's part of it. But it's about, like, if I have to carry this person's bag for the rest of my life because I know that he's reaching many people for the kingdom, I'll carry his bag for the rest of my life, even if I don't have to say another word. And that's the key, is being able to humbly accept whatever role you have in the church and not being able to say, oh, I want that one, I want that one, I want that one, I want that one. Being able to believe that whoever is in the position that is optimally best to make this church better, I'm willing to carry his bag.
They were talking about how, like, it's not necessarily, like, what you do or how you're seen, but it's, like, that's not the value of the service that you do. And they were talking about how in the Old Testament, like, everybody's, like, carrying, like, these heavy things, like, on the journey, and then, like, it writes there's one guy, like, carrying a spoon, right? So, like, everybody else is carrying, like, these huge parts, and this one guy is carrying a spoon, but they were saying that how that spoon had the incense. And so, like,
isn't true for them. It's really about how you live and how you act. Because if you could know all the theology in the world, know all the rights in the world, know all the hymns in the world, and you don't know God, what is that? St. Paul says it does. He says if I was able to speak in tongues and do all these different things and have love, and not loved, it's nothing. It's futile. It's nothing. So that's the toughest part. It's really being able to be people of Christ-like integrity. Faith-filled vision. I'm going to sort of try to run through this a little bit. So faith-filled vision is we believe that God is a big God. We rely on Him to do extraordinary things in our lives. We are not surprised when God does a miracle. We are more surprised when He doesn't. So we're not surprised when we go out to do a service and we speak to somebody, we give them a car, and the next day they're out of church. Because we know that our God is big enough to do miracles. We're not surprised when we go out to a market and we hand out a bunch of business cards, that those people, maybe a month down the line, come back to the church and say, hey, I met you a few months ago at a business card, and here's the here, I just want to show you your church. It's like, we're not surprised when God is doing miracles. Because we're actually not surprised when He isn't. We're surprised when He isn't. And that's the key, is that we know that God is great, and we know that God is able to do exceedingly and abundantly and more than we can even ask, that we talked about yesterday. So expect miracles. Expect them. If we expect miracles, then when they happen, it's just ordinary. Because you know God is doing them all the time. And they're happening now. Yesterday was a miracle. I don't know if you guys realize, you guys know what happened yesterday? You guys saved somebody's life. Like, you guys saved somebody's life. The heavens are rejoicing. I mean, the Bible says it very clear. It says, the heavens are rejoicing. Like, there's a party upstairs for one sinner who repents. There's a party. Heaven rejoices every single day when we repent. It's not just about Him, it's about all of us, too. The heavens are rejoicing. Irrational generosity. This was the tough one. Giving till it hurts. So, our church, by the grace of God, in a few months, is doing very well financially. We've had one person give a $40,000 donation. He wasn't a rich person. We don't know who it is. But when Anthony was talking about evangelize on a day-to-day basis, not just through words. Often, like, we want it to be words, but we want it also to be action. We don't want it to be empty words. So if I don't have a personal call to evangelism, I have a personal call to share the great gift, the great treasure that I've received, then the church isn't going to have a personal call to evangelism. Because if each of us don't feel compelled to serve and to commission and to reach those who haven't heard, then how are we going to do it together? Except genuine love for our community. So here's the crazy. So we said that we don't want to be a church that is, giving to Africa, giving to Egypt, giving all these different things. We want, with whatever budget we have, we're going to tithe 10% of our budget to serve the local community in the area. So, for example, our budget, say hypothetically, we have $170,000. Just for example, 17,000 of that budget, of that money, that revenue that came in, we're going to give to the local community. So, whether it be a campaign to buy computers for the local school, or whether it be to have a weekly soup kitchen for those who are homeless, or whether it be whatever. We're tithing from what we have in order to have genuine love for the community and to serve our community and neighborhood. So we're focused on making Arlington and the D.C. area transformed. And we think that it's going to go from not just D.C. and Arlington, it's going to impact the whole entire U.S. and it's going to impact the whole entire world. It's just slowly but surely working from here. That's why we started this association called the Hope Association. Hope Association is a non-profit that is sort of separate from the church but part of the church. It's like basically the church's arm to go out and serve the community and to do service and mission in the area. We still haven't launched. We're going to have revival conferences and stuff like that 2 times a year. We're going to do community service projects and mission projects. Like I said, we still haven't had really a public launch, but if you want to check it out, it's called the hopeassociation.org. That's what it's about. So we went through this yesterday, we went through this yesterday, we went through this yesterday, we went through this yesterday. We didn't go through this yesterday. So what I'm learning, not just serving to serve, that I'm telling you, we get used to the idea of just serving just to serve, like without really having a purpose, without really having a calling. Like, here's the problem. In every Coptic church, there's a few people that are really doing a lot of stuff, so they're overworked. And so, anytime you go to any Coptic church, you find a few people that are really slaving away and doing a million different things. But they're not being as effective as they should be. Because each of those people have one specific gift or some specific talent that God has given them. That if they focus on that, they'll really be so effective. But the problem is that so many others aren't helping. We said yesterday that we don't want to be consumers. We don't want to be just people that are sitting in the congregation. We want to be contributors. We want to have an impact. We don't want to be the type of people that are just watching from a distance. So that's the thing. If I know I'm good at something, I don't have to do 4, 5, 6 other things. That you're going to do one of those 6 things. Another person's going to do another one of those 6 things. Another person's going to do another 6 things. And each person is optimally pursuing their passion and effectively working with the gift that God has given them. So what I'm learning is I'm not just serving just to serve, but finding what my purpose is, what my passion is, what God wants me to do, and filling the gap of what that is. Patience. Oh gosh. I know you guys right now are at the point where you're sort of felt a little discouraged. When you're week in, week out, doing outreach and services and all these different things, you're not really seeing fruits. It's the toughest thing in the world. It's just like a fear for investing in lives. It's like investing in building people, investing in encouraging people. And that I've been learning a lot about. It's just really taking the time to sit with somebody and talk for 2 hours. Talk for 3 hours. And go out to dinner on 11 p.m. when somebody's in need. Like investing and really giving your life to somebody else in order to build them, in order to help them. And not that you're just investing in them, they're also investing in you. And the other thing is discipling young people. We have some young people in our church, some teenagers, we have some people that are new in college and stuff like that. So really taking the time for my own self is really to share with them, to encourage them, to play basketball with them, to do different kinds of things. Just really investing again in people. If you look at the mission of Jesus, he loved everyone. He fed 5,000, he trained 70, he taught 12, but he mentored 3. If you mentor each person, mentors 1. If each person invests in 1 person. Those 3 were Peter, James, and John. Peter was the rock. He went out to preach, went out to do all these different things, about serving, down, 5 down, all these different things. James, the brother of, they call him the brother of the Lord, the cousin of Jesus. You know, all these miraculous, great things. John, we don't love him. Like, he invested in him. He really gave 100% to him. Taught him, showed him how to pray, showed him how to do all these different things. If we invest in each other, invest in relationships, I promise you this church is going to be different. And I just want to close with, like I said yesterday, the most important thing is not just being a spirit-filled church, but I want you guys to really go back and watch that Not Even In series on our church, and just watch the accountability part. It's called Lone Rangers and Dead Rangers. Is that if we do things on our own, like we're going to be in trouble. If we do things together, like we really will build this church into being what it needs to be. And I have an accountability partner who I've never heard of that before in my life. Before I was in St. Paul's had your father confession. He was the one we sort of confessed to. But there was nobody there to hold me on a day-to-day basis for accounting. So your father confession is for your generalized issue. So it's hypothetically, you have an issue with love, so you sort of talk to him about this. He's there to give you guidance. But your accountability partner is there for you to be specific with him. So you say, hey, I'm struggling with this sin. Every single one of us. Nobody in this world has everything put together. And then, like I said, the beginning to open it out. And I think that's going to revolutionize the whole culture of the church. Is that if we're not so hidden behind the mask that we have, we'll begin to start being able to expose. Because it says, he who covers his sin will not prosper, but he who reveals it will find what? Mercy and forgiveness. It's mercy and providence. If you cover your sin, you're not going to prosper. But if you reveal it, you'll find forgiveness. You'll find grace. So, I think that's an important thing to try to start meeting together on small groups. You need to meet in 16, 17, 18. You need to make smaller. Like if there's a group of guys that are free on Tuesday nights, get together, do a Bible study, share with each other, pray with each other, encourage each other. Lone Rangers or Dead Rangers. If you're by yourself, you're not going to be able to really grow to the potential that you're supposed to be. Anyone else? Thanks for your question. Sure, I know you have to say so I'm waiting for you. Sure.
So like we're in this weekend and like we have the hyper of this whole evangelism conference and whatnot. So what happens when you guys leave? Have all this is gone and we're just left with us. And what we have to do and not even like not just like left with the people here at St. Paul, like we're just left with ourselves. How do we keep up with the spirit and what we've gotten from this weekend going? And what does it take to keep it going?
I think guys, after I leave, are planning to do something with that. But I'll give you guys what drives me to keep myself. After a long, fired up weekend, like this is a fired up weekend for me too, and I'm going back to work tomorrow. You know? So, how do you keep up? Here's the thing that I've learned recently. If you don't have personal motivation, like to wake up in the morning and to find time with God and to really spend time with Him throughout the day, like it's not going to ever equate to anything in the church. Like what I was finding was I was serving, but I wasn't having any personal time with God. Like I wasn't reading, I wasn't praying, I wasn't sharing like things, like writing things down. Like I had lost my own personal relationship with God because I was so busy giving. So what you take from this weekend is learn all these great service things and all these evangelism tools and all these different things. But the most important thing is tomorrow morning you spend time with God, and in spending time with God, He challenges you to use what you got from the weekend. Because if you're not using what they say, practice makes perfect, right? So if you're not using what you acquired this weekend, you're going to lose it. You don't use it, you'll lose it. So you got to use what you acquired from this weekend, otherwise you're going to lose it. You're not going to be able to, like you're going to feel discouraged, you're going to feel like, remind yourself always of what happened this weekend. But I think the key is that personal intimacy with God. I mean, Mina can tell you from traveling all over the world and all these different things, he can definitely tell you that in order for him to stay filled up, and I don't know how he stays filled up, but in order for him to stay filled up, he has to spend time with God in order to replenish. Because when you're going from city to city to city doing all these different crazy things, you gotta find time with God. And when you're going from day to day to day to day to day, work, home, family, eating, drinking, doing all these different things, if you don't find time with God, you're going to till the next trip. By God's grace, we'll come back, and next time we see you guys, like I said, I mean, I was so encouraged this weekend by this church. Oh my gosh, you don't understand, you don't understand being here and see what you guys are doing, see you guys have a building, and see what you guys are reading, and fellowship, and worship is amazing. There's just such a great worship team, and it's just so awesome. It's such an awesome church to see, and I know, don't lose heart. Just be of good cheer. God is going to bring people to this church. He's going to open up these doors, that the floodgates aren't going to be able to hold the people from coming in here. So, like I said, it's been a pleasure. It's been really a blessing. And I'm praying for you guys to pray for us as a church. Pray for me and for all the guys that are here. I know John is heading out, so I'm going to give you a chance to really share this weekend. Like I said, it's really been awesome. So thank you guys for really blessing our lives and giving us opportunities to be encouraged.
I'm just going to real quickly thank everybody here for welcoming us. And just like Chris said, I just want to echo the same kind of words that, we were really encouraged by you guys. And hopefully